Okay, so good morning. I'm Cheryl Hung. I'm Director of Ecosystem at the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. And I'm going to talk today about the past, the present, and the future of Cloud Native. And my Twitter handle is at @oicheryl, and these slides will be on my blog at oicheryl.com. So the objectives of today are to look at Kubernetes from a community perspective, to demystify the CNCF and explain what does an open source foundation really do, and then to ask the question, why does any of this even matter? But before I go into that, I'm going to explain where I come from and my perspective. So when I was 14, I decided that my goal was to be a software engineer at Google. And I decided this because Google was still the cool young tech startup where they give you free food and they have massages and it sounds great, right? So that's what I did. I went off, got my computer science degree, and I joined Google in 2010. So I was a software engineer building products and features on top of Google Maps. And products I worked on include Google Hotpot, which is now cancelled, and Zagat, which is now cancelled, and Google Plus Local, which is now cancelled, along with the rest of Google Plus. So I can't say that I learned much about launching successful products, but I did learn a lot about building C++, microservices, horizontal scalability, monitoring, and all these things that now we consider as part of Cloud Native. So after 5 years, I left, and in 2015, Docker and containers were just coming up. So I went off, moved into developer advocacy, and joined a startup. And I was looking for places where I could speak. And I looked at meetup.com. I noticed there's a Cloud Native, or there was a Cloud Native Berlin, a Cloud Native Paris, Cloud Native Barcelona. There wasn't a Cloud Native London. So I went ahead and created it, and now I run monthly events for 200 to 300 people every month. So if you are ever in London on the first Wednesday of the month, that's where you can find me. So please come and hang out. So getting involved in the community led me to join the Cloud Native Computing Foundation as the Director of Ecosystem. And who has actually heard of the CNCF? Okay, so probably like 80%. So at the CNCF, my mission is to increase the adoption of Kubernetes and Cloud Native, and in particular to help with companies and organizations that are looking to adopt Kubernetes. So that's me. So let's look at some numbers around Kubernetes as a project and as a community. So Kubernetes joined the CNCF in 2016, and since that time, 35,000 people have contributed, 1.1 million contributions from 2,000 companies. And contributions here is defined as anyone who has made or reviewed a comment, commit, issue, or pull request on GitHub. If you look at the number of companies, or the makeup of the companies that are joining, so on the left, Google and Red Hat are the biggest contributors to Kubernetes, and initially they made up about 85% of all contributions. But over time, as other companies have joined, they now make up about 35%, even as the overall number of contributions continues to go up. So this is a sign of a healthy ecosystem where the originators are still contributing, but they're sharing the stewardship of the project with other companies. The same is true of countries. So the majority of developers originally came from the United States, but over time, the percentage of contributors has dropped as other people in other countries can contribute. So this graph shows you the 30 highest velocity open source projects. And the x-axis is the number of commits. The y-axis is the number of pull requests and issues. And the size of the bubble represents the number of authors. So Linux is the purple one to the top right, and Kubernetes is the pinkish one that's next to it, sort of in the middle at the top. And then KubeCon CloudNativeCon is the conference that the CNCF runs. And in the last 4 years, it's gone from 550 people, and it's expected to hit 23,000 people this year, including in San Diego. Actually, is anybody coming to KubeCon San Diego? 1, 2, 3 people. OK, cool. And then the last measure is what companies actually use Kubernetes. So these are the companies that I primarily work with, including Zalando. So Henning, who was speaking just before the coffee break, is one of the companies who are part of the end user community. OK, so now let me explain what an open source foundation really does, because before I joined the CNCF, I don't think I could have explained. So CNCF is a non-profit. It's part of the Linux Foundation. And the philosophy of the Linux Foundation is that developers work on open source projects. Those projects get made into products by companies. The companies generate profits. And some of those profits go back into open source, and encouraging more adoption, more innovation. And then hopefully this circle goes round and round and round, and we get more open source, more products, more profits, more companies engaged. So as a nonprofit, we're funded primarily through membership. So here are some of the companies that are joining us. Here's a few more. Here's a few more. Here's a few more. OK. So that pays for the salaries of 10 staff, including myself. And the mission of the CNCF is to foster and sustain these open source projects around cloud native. So the most famous one is Kubernetes, but from there we've grown from up to several dozen projects. And these are organized by Graduated, which are the most mature ones, Incubating, and then Sandbox is the most experimental ones. OK, so in practice, what does the CNCF do? So CNCF is made up of 3 pillars. The first one is the governing board, and they decide on the budget and the strategy of the foundation, and they're primarily from vendors. The technical oversight committee is a group of 9 architects who are elected from the community. And in fact, that's just gone up to 11, but currently 9. And their responsibility is to decide what projects are part of the CNCF. So they serve a term of 2 years. And so that means that the projects reflect what the community wants. And then finally, the end user community. The responsibility is to provide feedback on these projects and to be a check on the vendors. So CNCF does a lot of different services for projects. One of them is paying for security audits. So last month, we just released a report on the security of Kubernetes. We hire technical writers to write documentation and to translate it. So, for example, we have translators who work in Chinese. We run events, so KubeCon, Helm Summit, PromCon, EnvoyCon, and we are now launching more events around the world. We have lawyers who defend what Kubernetes means and ensure that companies who release products saying this is Kubernetes are really Kubernetes, and they're not using it to just apply to any old project. OK, so let me sum all of that up. So in practice, CNCF does things that open source developers don't want to do themselves. that's how I see it. Okay, so a question I always get, can you tell us how to build whatever? This is the landscape of CNCF. It's a view of all the products, or as many products as we can find, that are related to cloud native. So this is quite hard to read, but you can go to l.cncf.io to see this. And people say, can you come and help us, tell us what's the right way to build cloud native? So the answer is no. We cannot tell you if you're building this correctly or not. And we're not a consultancy, so it's up to you to decide what's the right way for you or to hire an actual consultant. Second question I always get asked, can we donate whatever project, open source project, to the CNCF? And this is a look at the process for going from sandbox to incubating to graduated. So what this means is that the technical oversight committee vote on what projects come in and out of the CNCF. So the earliest stages, you need 2 people to agree. After that, you need 2/3 of the TOC to agree. They're reviewed every year. And then some projects like Rocket, where the usage has declined over time, get archived. And there's quite a few more criteria related to showing that your project has a healthy number of contributors and it has a healthy governance structure and so on. So you can go to that link if you want to read the full criteria. Okay, so why does this even matter? So in this survey, they asked, what percentage of your containers are running in production? And if you look on the left-hand side, 39% of companies said that not even 10% of their containers run in production. So even though Kubernetes seems like this great, pretty successful project with lots of momentum, lots of adoption, but in truth, most companies are not anywhere near the level that you might expect from all the hype. So some of the barriers to adoption are familiar to all open source projects. So it's hard to integrate Kubernetes across different tools, different products, different frameworks. It's hard to manage upgrades. It's hard to keep control of where your data is located and manage it. Enterprises who need to manage security and identity and compliance and cost need tools that will help them along the way. And all of these are really important topics and worth talking about, but I'm actually going to take a bit of a different direction because I'm going to talk about a topic that a lot of people are thinking about, which is climate change. So data centers emit as much CO2 as the airline industry. And if the global IT industry were a country, only China and the United States would contribute more to climate change. So people in the UK where I live think about using less plastic, eating less meat, but really we have the ability to do a lot more than any of those changes. So let me talk about what can we do about it. So these are from case studies that were written by CNCF. Spotify, once they deployed Kubernetes, found that their CPU utilization improved by 2 to 3 times because of Kubernetes bin packing and multi-tenancy capabilities, which means you can pack more applications into the same amount of nodes. The city of Montreal took several hundred application components across hundreds of virtual machines, and they moved them onto 8 Kubernetes nodes, including the Kubernetes master. So as engineers, that's great for efficiency. For organizations, the cost savings are obvious, but this also means that we can use less energy and less resources to do the same amount of work. And this trend looks set to continue. So thanks to mobile and IoT and edge and so many more, 5G, and people from countries like India and China also joining. This number is going to go, this trend is going to keep going. So what can we do about it? So I'll give an example from Netflix. So I was talking to an engineer from Netflix, and they don't use Kubernetes because they have their own homegrown container orchestrator. And in fact, I don't think they even use containers. I believe they use VMs. So I asked him, what's stopping you from moving to Kubernetes? And he said, Kubernetes does not scale to our needs. And Netflix, I know, is an exception because it's absolutely massive. But with Kubernetes, you can say, I specify this much CPU, this much memory, whatever for my container, and Kubernetes will manage that. But at Netflix, they can also schedule jobs together so that for every node, you maximize the CPU-bound jobs, the memory-bound jobs, and the I/O-bound jobs. So you make use of all the resources and all the capacity across every node. So that's an area that I think, while it benefits Kubernetes at scale, also means that larger companies can adopt Kubernetes and get better efficiency out of it. So I guess if I have a takeaway today, I would say infrastructure matters. We all know this. But the impact of that is going to be up to us. So thank you very much. These slides are on my blog, oishell.com. Cheers.